Hi, I'm Dave Bundy, editor of the Lincoln Journal-Star, and we are at our editorial board endorsement interview with Patt Pansing Brooks, candidate for the 1st Congressional District. Patty, thanks a bunch for being with us. Before we have you do most all the talking, we'll have our other edit board members introduce themselves for our readers. So Natalia, you want to go first?
Yes, good morning. My name is Natalia Witta, and I am president of the Lincoln Journal-Star.
Fabulous.
Kent, you're up. You missed your cue.
I'm Kent Walgamot. I write about arts and entertainment. I've been on the editorial board for more than a decade. As Patty knows, we've gone through this a few times.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm honored to be with all of you today. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Patty. And so your first question is kind of a good way for an introduction for anyone. And it may sound familiar from the spring primary, but why do you want to serve in Congress? It hasn't looked like a lot of fun, but you're putting a lot of effort into it. And then what experiences and attributes qualify you and make you think you can succeed in this office?
Well, your first question was, of course, front and center, because who in the world really wants to do this? That's the main question. And when this journey opened, when we redistricted last September in the legislature and it became a bit more progressive in CD1, I just thought, I look at it like voting. I feel like people have a duty to vote. My dad fought in World War II, was wounded, and you know, our nightly dinner table conversations were about democracy, our precious Constitution, and all of that. So that sort of got ingrained in me. And when this opportunity opened with the change in the district, I thought I have a duty to move forward and try to bring this country back together, and to try to get people to quit lobbing grenades, finger pointing, and you know, just remember that we're each other's neighbors, colleagues, friends, and family. We are not each other's enemies. We're Americans, and we are not each other's enemies. And so that's something that you know, you are right. Who would really want to do this? We have a fabulous life here in Lincoln. We love it here. We have great friends. Again, I look at it almost as duty. So I know that then people, their eyes start rolling up in the back of their heads because they think, well, oh, look at that kitty cat. What in the world does she think she can do? But, you know, we have to try. We have to work on bipartisanship and working across the aisle. And we know that right now, the people in Congress are only working for the extremes of both parties. And I'm just not going to go do that. And I risk a 2 years as your first Congresswoman. I understand that, but I think it's important. I think American people are sick and tired of what's going on, and I'm bold enough to try. So that's number one. What makes me ready for this is, you know, I'm a mom. I'm a community advocate and fundraiser for years. I am a small business owner, a lawyer, and a 2-term state senator. So I feel my life has truly sort of prepared me for this point. And I'm ready to try to help and give back to this fabulous country.
Okay, well, thank you. So you alluded to this, and I guess I did in my question too, but ours is a divided state. It's a divided nation. It's a divided congressional district. How you talked about, you know, the parties sort of catering to extremes. How do you, in your mind, how do you represent folks that disagree with you, or what? How do you talk to them? How do you have a dialogue with them?
Well, I've just spent 8 years doing that in the Nebraska legislature. As aggravating as many Nebraskans find the Nebraska legislature, because we do not find perfect solutions to everybody's desires for our state. we do find common ground, and I've been able to work across the aisle with the most conservative people in the legislature, and they are my friends, and I'm fortunate to understand that and be able to, in most red states, progressives don't get to pass over 60 bills. And I worked with Senator Linehan and went across the state to look at reading and work on all sorts of issues. I worked with Senator Brewer on all sorts of Native issues, and we made huge changes there. I worked with Senator Bostelman on the floods. We co-chaired a committee to look at the floods in 2019 and we were the first political officials that even went up to Spencer Dam and all of those places that have been devastated. We can work together. We care about each other. And yes, we may have different methods to get things done, but it isn't rocket science. This is just, recognizing that the people are not evil. The people are not our enemies. We must move forward. I worked on trafficking with all that was supported. I worked with Attorney General Peterson on that, and then worked with some of the most conservative members of our legislature. And actually, in that regard, we went from an F ranking when I first got into the legislature to an A ranking by Polaris, the national anti-trafficking group. So, but that wouldn't have been done without all the support across the aisle. And we have a precious gem in the middle of our country. And I think that some of that needs to go to DC.
Well, that's a good pep talk for a guy who has to read all the letters to the editor. So thank you. What do you see as key elements that our country needs to pursue in terms of energy and environmental policies?
Well, I think that I really care about the fact that right now there's no silver bullet. There's no silver bullet on energy. We have to use all the sources, but Nebraska should lead on that. We need our ag producers to be front and center, leading on ethanol and various forms of energy. We know that we need to continue with fossil fuels, but also we are third in wind in Nebraska, and we're 15th in production of wind. Solar is a huge resource that we have here, and we are not expanding it to the point that we can. And of course, with ethanol, we all know that that's produced by corn, but other grains can be used for that too, like soybeans. So we should not only feed the world, but fuel the world. And I think it's really clear that if we have enough support for our farmers, we can step up and be number one in production of energy resources as well as food resources.
All right. Next question is about the national debt. Are you concerned about it? And if so, what steps need to be taken to control it?
I am absolutely concerned about that. In Nebraska, we have a constitutional requirement that we have a balanced budget. I can't quite understand why we don't have something like that in Congress, but I think that what we need to do is have a bipartisan committee to get together and look at all this and figure out what it is. Of course, the biggest stressors on our budget are things like Medicare, Medicaid, education. I mean, we have got to figure out what we can do. And we know that in the past, my opponent will continue to talk about the money on ARPA and all of that funding. But we know also that a lot of those ARPA dollars are going to infrastructure and to making sure that our roads and bridges are seamless and strong, and that we have great access to dollars for broadband. And these are the connectors across our state and across the country and to the rest of the world, to the markets in the rest of the world. So to say that those dollars were misspent, you know, it isn't just black and white. We know that these roads, I-80, the highways, all that are integral to the speed of our economy and how our economy thrives. So we've got to figure out, I don't have every answer. No political party has every answer, but together we can figure this out. And I really believe that. And, you know, what's happening now is not perfect in Congress by any means, but we have got to do a better job working together across the aisle to make sure that our spending is not out of control, and that we can, you know, we can do a better job on our deficit and cut it down.
All right, thanks, Patty. What international issues keep you awake at night, if any of them do?
They do. Of course, Ukraine keeps me awake. I feel like we're working as well as we can with our NATO allies. I hope that they continue to support us in a strong, that we all work together in a strong manner. Of course, you know, the balances between boots on the ground and World War III versus making sure that we provide a strong enough front with economic sanctions and other efforts to not let Russia just take over some of our most important democratic allies, including Taiwan. That's another concern, of course. And again, we know that some of the greatest threats to our country are China and Russia. Russia militarily and China economically. Those are things that concern me, what's happening right now. And we've got to get our best and brightest involved in looking at these issues. Again, we know that Taiwan has been on the forefront, and again, they're a democratic entity. They're now part of one China, but they are a democratic entity and friend, and we've got to do what we can to support them, again, without causing World War III or having some sort of issue. So of significant effect across the world. So those are things that keep me up at night. The other thing that keeps me up at night is the lack of civility, and I'm coming back to that again. But the political divide in our country is very upsetting to me. Having, you know, lived as long as I have and seen how political parties have changed, how people have seemed to not understand that, again, that we are Americans first, and families and friends, and that is truly something that concerns me. And we've got to work to change that and remind people that we are each other's friends, okay? And I know I've said that before, but it really is something that I care about.
All right, well, you're a very efficient answerer, Patty. So I've got one last question, but I have to make it the last question. So this will be where Kent always jumps in. And Natalia, if you have anything too. Natalia, do you have any particular questions? Because if you don't, Kent will take up the time.
No, I'm good. We'll hand it over to Kent.
All right, we yield the floor to the gentleman in his basement.
Wait 1 second. I want to say that Natalia, congratulations on being the new president. That's so cool.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Patty.
Yeah, wonderful to have your leadership here. Thank you.
Well, let's start with an easy one, so to speak. As you know, 99% of the work in the legislature, and even more maybe in the Congress, gets done in committee. Have you given some, and I know you can't just walk in and say, I'm going to be on, but have you given some thoughts to what committees you'd want to be on and why?
Yeah, well, absolutely. First off, I'll preface it by saying I have a number of advisory groups that are helping me right now. And so I've got people that it will be listed soon. I've been working with them actually since I started. And so I've got an ag and rural advisory group. I have a veterans advisory group. I have a JEDIA, which is justice, equity, diversity, inclusion and accessibility, which includes people of Jewish faith who are helping me with Israel and issues regarding anti-Semitism, as well as Latinos and people of African American, LGBTQ. So that's a very broad committee. Also one on science and climate. So I have about 12 committees of advisory groups of key people. So my goal would be to represent the bulk of the district, which is basically rural, which would be the ag committee. And even though that has not been in necessarily my wheelhouse, I told you about those ag advisors because they are the ones that are advising me and helping me on all that. And I know that for Nebraska to thrive, 1/4 of our jobs are in ag, that we have to make sure that we have policies that help farmers and ag producers. So that's one thing. Obviously, I would love to be on appropriations. That's a gift usually given to newbies, and small business. That's what that's what my husband and I have done. We've helped businesses grow across this state, both small and large businesses. So that is obviously in my wheelhouse and would be something that I would enjoy as well. It's funny because I think when I went into that legislature, one of the first things that happened is that somebody said, well, that kids don't have a right to counsel across the state. And I said, what? And they said, no, there's no juvenile right to counsel across the state. And I said, the Supreme Court decided 52 years ago in Ray Galt that the condition of being a boy does not justify a kangaroo court. It's totally unreasonable. And it was funny because I'm telling you why I took a left turn from my work in business and law and small businesses. And it basically was because I recognized that these kids had been out there and haven't had counsel. They have been admitting to infractions and all sorts of different crimes without counsel. I don't recommend any single soul go into a courtroom without representation. Even as a lawyer, I would never do that. So here are our children, the most vulnerable, and we're arresting our future. We know workforce development is the #1 issue in the state for the state chamber, and yet we've been arresting our future. So we now thankfully have access to attorneys for children and juveniles across this state. I'm very proud of that. So that's to tell you why when I went into that legislature, I did sort of a left turn. I did more work on judiciary, and I didn't focus on small business. There were enough people doing that I felt that the needs that I was seeing at that moment were with people that were needing help, including kids, including people who were trafficked, including people on the margins and our minorities. And so that's why I did a lot of work on indigenous people too. So anyway, so that is a long way of telling you that I would try to do ag because I do think it's important to our whole state.
The January 6th committee is, going to have its final hearing in the next week, I believe now, and they'll come out with a report and all. But this issue is not going to disappear magically on November 8th or January 10th or whenever the swearing in is. How do you deal with that? How do you confront not just it seems to me there's the issues with the former president, and then there are the broader issues with electoral, denial and voting rights and those kind of things. Where do you come down on that?
Well, again, I think it's communication. I think it's making sure that our elections are safe, that we work together to ensure. I don't think, short of people on the very fringe, most moderate Republicans that I speak with, independents and Democrats, care about our elections, care about making sure that they are safe and valid. We know that Vice President Pence certified that election on January 6th. And also William Barr, the former president's attorney general, also said there was no election fraud. So we've got to go forward. We've got to communicate. I don't know what to do about the rhetoric that keeps going out there and that some people believe. But we have got to try to find common ground and work together. There's no common ground on our elections. I mean, other than the fact that they've got to be free and safe. That's for sure. I think most Americans believe that. But I will vote to support our elections, vote to help make sure. There was a recent act, the presidential, Election Reform Act. I can't remember the title of it, but my opponent just voted against that. And that act that just was voted on said that the vice president can't disaffirm an election. That position is that position of the vice president is mostly ceremonial. So that's one thing. I totally agree with that, and I think most Americans would. There is another part of that act, because I don't think most Americans realize that one person from each party in Congress could disaffirm the election. And they went through and said, no, it's going to take a third of the people from each party to disaffirm an election. So I don't think that anyone thought that really President or Vice President Pence could have disaffirmed that election, but that's what Trump was really talking about, and it's a part of our law. And Congress just passed this Reform Act, and I would have supported that for sure. It's important that our elections are upheld. If there's something wrong, we want to know it. Absolutely, we want to make sure that our voting machines are safe. And but I will try to again work to communicate with people, work to be able to make sure that that the electors are valid and chosen in an appropriate manner. So
just FYI, Mitch McConnell signed off on that yesterday, and it will pass the Senate.
Oh wow, I did not hear that. Thank you. Well, my opponent did not vote for that, so just
the other sort of, at least national issue that's getting all the attention is reproductive rights. The sense that the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe has sort of shifted the debate, and I guess I know your position, but what do you hear from the people that are out there that you talk to, and how can you bring that, to something on a federal level, as opposed to, oh, it's now back in the states. Maybe it needs to be done federally.
Okay, well, that's a good question. Again, Kent, of course. So I think I'll start by talking about when I started late November. I start calling people, because that's what we have to do, is call and get people to donate to the campaign. That's another story about, I have over 7,000 single voters, and I'm not taking corporate PACs. But with that issue, as I would call people, I always ask, what are your key issues for Nebraska and for the country? And absolutely, no question, there wasn't a second or third. Inflation at that point was the key issue. And I'm calling moderate Republicans, independents, and Democrats. And so it was absolutely hands down inflation until we hit about late April when that Dobbs opinion was leaked. Remember, I think it was in April. Anyway, at that point, it was so amazing to me. Since that point, inflation has become third or fourth of critical issues, which I find amazing. I think it's still a critical issue. And as I talk to people, of course, inflation is a key issue. But front and center is reproductive rights, government mandates telling people what to do about their own health care, doctors upset that they could be found guilty of felonies because of their actions that they take, which they've already been trained on, including something, like in vitro fertilization or DNC. I have a friend who is in Texas, and that person became pregnant over Memorial Day, or announced to us on Memorial Day, so pregnant before that, but about being pregnant. And we found out later that the fetus died in utero, and by the end of June, was completely gone. And but my friend went to an OBGYN in Texas, her OBGYN, and the doctor said, "I'm sorry, we can't do anything about it. We would normally do a DNC because you are at risk of sepsis if it doesn't naturally come out, if it doesn't naturally abort." And at that point, they said, "Your life is at risk. You need to go across state lines." So they fortunately had the capacity to go across state lines and were able to go. I mean, to me, that's just absolutely ridiculous to not trust doctors and their patients to be able to make a reasonable decision. My opponent does not deserve a seat at my daughter's exam table or any other woman's. And I truly resent this. We worked for decades to make sure that women have had their reproductive rights and access to health care. And the other thing as I'm talking to people is that really the thing that is the most mind numbing to most people is birth control. And it's, wherever somebody is on abortion, I understand why people do not feel that it's appropriate for their lives, and that's fine. But my opponent even objects with rape and incest. So number one, they don't want, some people are pushing against abortion. And then they're also, on the other hand, saying no birth control. Well, who gets to make these decisions? That's just 90% of Americans believe in some form of birth control. Even the rhythm method is a form of birth control. So, I mean, this is unreasonable. It is way beyond the pale. And, again, I sort of feel like I'm in the right place at the right time. I think it helps to be a little bit older, having gone through the 70s and seen what happened, and to be able to stand up and say, this is not appropriate, this isn't right. And even if it's only this journey, we're pretty sure I'm going to win. But even if it's only this journey right now, it's been a blessing to be able to talk to people, to give them courage to stand up and say, this is wrong. We are not going to go forward this way. So I feel very fortunate about that. Again, the number one issue is reproductive rights. And I think the second issue is something that I've started from the beginning on, and somehow my opponent has just totally lost track of, and that's bipartisanship. It actually is the second most. We've actually done some polling, and that is the second highest issue. People are tired of the mudslinging. And I feel fortunate. I started this because of the nonpartisan and the nonpartisan legislature. I feel fortunate to have had that 8 years of experience and say, we need to bring this to the rest of the country. So those are really the things. And of course, inflation is very important. People not being able to pay for gas and groceries, and even in production, of course, that's all affecting farmers. It's affecting all sorts of people. So is that what you wanted to know?
Okay, hey, Ken,
No, I was just going to say, I think the notion that the Congress can do a lot about inflation is kind of overstated, but that's, the process doesn't work that way. So
Well,
anyway, thank you.
we can lower prescription drugs. We can lower the premiums on the Affordable Care Act. Those things would be helpful to the American people. And so we know that Medicaid, that the drug companies can now have to negotiate on prescription drugs. So that can be extended to the American people as well. So just to throw that back at you a little bit, Kent. Yeah, we can't solve every problem in the world, but those are a couple of ways we can.
So Patty, we're at the last question and right at the end of our 30 minutes. And you've covered a lot of ground, so I'm not quite sure how you'll answer this, but what have we not asked you about that you wish we would have?
Well, I think that one of the things that I want to focus and reaffirm is that workforce development is the #1 issue for the state chamber and the other chambers. We have got to do a better job welcoming people to our state. We know that all sorts of businesses are having trouble finding employees. We have low unemployment, and that's incredible, but it also means we don't have a good pool of active employees to hire. And the other thing that I thought was interesting recently is that I found out that we know the sad fact that over 1 million people died from COVID, but over 4 million people have long-term COVID. That's shocking, and that of course affects our workforce. So we've got to do what we can to become a welcoming state. That includes welcoming LGBTQ people. It includes welcoming our DACA kids and make sure that they have opportunities. We've got to do the best that we can to make sure that our economy is thriving and growing, and not just stick our heels in the sand and said, no, only these types of employees. We've got to do better, and we can do better. And the Nebraskans I talk to want to do better. That's it, I think.
All right. Well, I think we've hit our 30 minutes. So Patty, thank you very much for the time this morning. We wish you best with your campaign, and thank you so much for answering our questions.
Well, thank you all. I hope, I guess I have to say that I hope you'll endorse my campaign. I'm working hard, and I really care about this, and I'm getting to all the communities around and the various groups. So I truly want to represent all Nebraskans. So thank you for all that you do for the free press and making sure that we are getting the information. We know that you are all under attack as well. So I'm grateful for what you do every single day. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Patty.
Bye, everybody.
See you later.
Bye.